Margaret Cole was 64 years old, a retired librarian with gentle eyes and a voice that never seemed to rise in anger. To those who knew her, she was the definition of loyalty, devoted to her husband, Thomas, for over 4 decades. She was modest, humble, the kind of woman who kept her hair pinned neatly and always carried tissues in her purse for someone else's tears. But beneath that calm exterior was a woman forged in fire. Margaret had spent her entire marriage shielding Thomas, from creditors, from gossip, and, most of all, from his own family. The Coles were a wealthy, old-guard dynasty in their Midwestern town, proud of their influence and protective of their reputation. They saw Thomas's marriage to Margaret as a betrayal. She wasn't one of them. She wasn't enough. And worst of all, she refused to bow. Her diary revealed the way she saw herself. Not a victim, but a barrier. A single line written weeks before her death captured her truth. If I am their enemy, it is because I stand between them and the man I love. The Cole family gatherings were infamous for their simmering tension. On the surface, there were smiles, toasts, and polished silverware. But beneath the veneer, resentment pulsed like a hidden current. Thomas, once the family's pride, had fallen into financial ruin. Margaret had been the one patching holes, paying bills, covering his mistakes. Where his family saw weakness, she saw a man worth fighting for. And that loyalty made her the target of whispered accusations. She keeps him away from us. She's the reason he doesn't stand tall. She's the one who ruined him. For years, Margaret endured it silently. But in truth, she carried the scars. The people who should have been her family treated her as an interloper. Every holiday, every dinner, every reunion was a battlefield. One where her only weapon was restraint. Until the summer gathering that changed everything. The invitation had arrived with elegant calligraphy, gilded edges, and a note about celebrating family. But when Margaret and Thomas walked into the Cole estate that humid evening, the atmosphere was different. Cold, calculated. At the long oak table, words turned to daggers. Accusations were hurled at Thomas. Debts unpaid, obligations unmet, shame brought upon the family name. Margaret stepped in, defending him as she always had. But this time, the rage turned on her. You've always covered for him. You're the reason he's weak. You don't belong here. The argument grew louder until Margaret, trembling but defiant, asked aloud, "Where is my party?" Her words cut through the room like glass. Later, investigators would find those same words written across her diary page, underlined 3 times. Her recognition that what she walked into wasn't a celebration, but an ambush. What she didn't know was that some family members had already discussed her fate. In hushed corners and over private drinks, they had agreed. If Margaret were gone, Thomas could be controlled again. Her loyalty made her dangerous, and dangerous people, in their minds, could not be allowed to stay. After that gathering, Margaret began noticing signs she couldn't ignore. A black SUV that seemed to follow her and Thomas home. Strange phone calls with silence on the other end. Shadows moving outside their porch late at night. Her instincts, sharpened by years of quiet observation, told her something was wrong. She began documenting everything in her diary. Names, dates, suspicious movements. It was the only place she felt safe. But Margaret didn't confront Thomas about her fears. Perhaps she didn't want to burden him, or perhaps she already knew he wouldn't believe her. Instead, she maneuvered in silence, staying alert, locking doors, watching the road. In her final weeks, her diary became less like a journal and more like evidence, as though she understood her own words might one day tell the story she would not live to finish. September 14th, 2021. The night the Cole family's secrets exploded into the open. Thomas had gone out late, leaving Margaret alone in their quiet house. Rain fell in heavy sheets, masking the sound of footsteps. Neighbors later reported hearing a scream, followed by glass shattering. When police arrived, the scene was chaos. Overturned furniture, broken lamps, a trail of blood across the carpet. Margaret was found unconscious, barely breathing. She never woke up. The investigation ripped through the town like wildfire. Detectives discovered financial records, phone calls, and testimony pointing back to the Cole family. Margaret's diary became the smoking gun. The phrase she had written, "Where is my party?" became the haunting symbol of her betrayal, proof that she had walked into her own death sentence with her eyes half open. In the end, several family members were implicated. What they had seen as power, control, and reputation was revealed as greed and cruelty. Margaret Cole's story became one of the most shocking cases in her town's history. She was remembered not just as a victim, but as a shield, a woman who gave her life standing between a man and the family determined to destroy him. Her diary was read aloud in court, her words etched into public memory. The town saw her not as an outsider, but as a woman of courage. Because in the end, Margaret's truth was clear. The danger wasn't from strangers, but from those who smiled across the table, raised their glasses, and shared her name.